Whether it's a birthday, a wedding, or say thank God it's Friday, a cake is usually a part of that celebration. Now, the cake and confectionery industry is a thriving business with thousands of bakers making a living off it. So on today's episode of Community Reports, we're looking at the cake industry. It's a business that adds its quota to Nigeria's GDP. So we would look at starting out, easy mistakes made as a starter, plus a lot of other things. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm Victoria Idowu. Celebrations take place every day at different times, different places. Hence the constant need for cake bakers. Cake making in itself is an industry that in all ramifications have proven to be a viable source of income to individuals, corporate and government. The cake industry is full with economic potentials which, when harnessed, has huge impacts in the Nigerian economy. The food and beverage industry, which cake and confectionaries are a part of, grew by 1.76% in the first quarter of 2019 from 2.22% in the fourth quarter of 2018 and 2.90% in the third quarter of 2018. Varieties of cake come in different shapes, sizes, forms and types.
So you clean the crumbs.
Our first baker is Ruth Adeni. She has been baking for over 20 years.
Okay, when I was growing up, my mom always baked. So she always got all the kids involved. I'm from a family of 2 boys and 2 girls, so my mom doesn't look at anybody as a boy, you shouldn't bake. Everybody joins her in the kitchen. So we used to make muffins, bread, hot dog bread, buns, chin-chin. Everybody was involved, so that was what brought about the interest. And since then, I've been baking since school. I'm actually a lawyer, so I baked through school. I was always baking in school. I loved baking so much I couldn't separate myself from it. So in between classes, after school, I was baking, making cakes for my classmates. People were paying for my services, but I was not really doing it as a business at that time when I was with my parents. It was when I got married and I had my first baby, and going back to work, the terms were not too convenient for me again because I needed to consider my son. So that was when I faced baking professionally, and started it as a business.
Ruth is not the only lawyer turned chef. Mudukwe Emmanuel started about 5 years ago.
I actually studied law initially, and after practicing for about 5 years, I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I pursued my dream of becoming a chef, and I went to the prestigious Le Cordon Bleu, where I trained as a patisserie chef as well as a cuisine chef. But my focus has been on pastries. So I started from my mom's kitchen and my dad's dining table. I remember very clearly he had just bought this dining table that was quite expensive, and that's where I started working and doing my decorating. Because I was coming back home with the intention of starting a business, I had bought some things, but as I went along, I would purchase things that I knew I needed at the time. But yeah, I literally started from my mom's kitchen. After a while, she's like, look, you need to get out of my kitchen. I just want my space to myself. So I was lucky enough, my parents were able to build a small kitchen for me just in their garage. After a while, it became too small. We had to expand it. And it took 5 years for us to then move to our own building because everything was just becoming too small.
Although baking is usually the specialization of women, more men have broken the trend and are standing tall.
I've been making cakes professionally for years, but I'd known about cakes since 2006. I had a couple of friends, guys, that were into cake that year. In fact, I used to believe that it was only women that makes cakes. So it was strange having friends that are guys making cakes. I didn't like the idea. I didn't like it at all. So, but I was friends with them. I got to see them like almost every time, and before I knew it, I started to touch it. I came to realize that there were potentials in cake making, because they had this special way of making crafts that not a lot of people know how to do. So I knew a lot of people in town, and I didn't have the talent then, and they had the talent and didn't know a lot of people in town. So basically my cake journey started by me just collecting orders, claiming to be a cake maker, giving to my guys that are professionals, and we just share the profits. That was how I started. I did that for a couple of years until I started to want to make all the money all to myself. And then I started to touch the sugar. My friends were there to assist, and that's why we're here today. But professionally, I've been in the business for just 4 years.
That ice cream I also used to decorate.
Every baker needs a market, and to get that market, a word of mouth from people who have tasted the cake is key.
Good food speaks for itself. So when you bake for one person, the person tells another person. Most times when you are baking like these cakes, you're baking it for one person, but you're going to have maybe like 20 people eating from the cake. So I had referrals, a lot of referrals, people, I tasted your cake, they call me on phone. I got a shop and I continued the business, and then somebody talked to me that Instagram is about pictures, put your pictures online and you get customers and all. So I started posting and people started calling me up. Although online business has its own challenges. Some people are a little scared, like I use scam and you fraud, so I get to talk to them, and I have I think most of my customers are online.
Knowledge of your market will help a baker know what to focus on.
I would say you take your time, study your market. It's very important to know who you're trying to cater to, and make sure that as much as possible you try to meet the needs of your customer. You can't do everything. You will not be able to cater to everybody. It's not possible. So just study, know your niche, know who you're trying to cater to, and just make sure that you are putting in your best. Baking is very, very tedious, so you also need to pace yourself. I mean, when I started, there were days my mom would help my brother, my nieces, like everybody's in the kitchen trying to help me, especially during Christmas. But you also have to make sure you take a break. If not, you can burn out, and learn to delegate when necessary. And also, as much as possible, learn from people who have already done it, who are already in the business. Get advice from them so that you don't make the same mistakes that they made, and it makes it easier for you. But yeah.
A cake is that sweet food made with mixture of egg, butter, sugar, milk, and icing as beautifiers. There are different ways of mixing the ingredients. This is just one of them.
You turn your bowl upside down, and your egg whites must not drop. So it shows that the color has changed and it's whipped.
While baking, following the process is very important.
Have to make sure that hygiene is very important. Your hands have to be clean. And then you have to make sure that you measure out your ingredients accurately, because I always say that baking is a science. There's so much accuracy. If you add, for instance, too much baking powder, the texture you're going to get is totally different. If you add too much milk, you're going to get a different consistency. So it's very important to measure out your ingredients accurately, and then you mix your ingredients properly. There's something called overmixing. So if, for instance, I overmix a cake, it affects the texture. It can become too hard, and because then you're stretching the gluten in the flour, and your cake sometimes can become like bread. Or if you overbake your cake, it then dries out. It's not as moist as it should be. So you also need to work with temperatures. You can't reduce your temperature. Your temperature can't be too low and it can't be too high. So if something says 160, you work with 160, but you also have to know your oven. As my chefs used to say, my teachers, they would say the oven, doesn't have a mouth to speak. You have to study your oven, know what temperature actually really works, and then you work with that temperature. So temperature is very important, hygiene is important, accuracy of measuring your ingredients are very important, and the mixing process. If it tells you to fold, there's a process called folding, and you don't do that, you can, you will definitely change the outcome of your cake. So following the process is so important.
And measurements plays a vital role.
So for any cake that you're going to bake, it's important that your measurements are very accurate. For instance, I'm about to measure flour. So let's say the measurement of my flour for the recipe is 200 grams. It has to be exactly 200. If it's like 250, it's going to change the texture. Even if it's so slight, it will change the texture of your cake, because more flour means your cake is going to be heavier or dense, and it won't be the right texture that you are expecting. So now I'm on 196, 198, 200. So that's an accurate measurement of my flour, which is what I need, 200 grams.
Let's talk decoration.
There are different things you can now do with buttercream, because people have innovated all sorts of things. Right now, we're painting the edges of a cake with gold just to give it a bit of highlights, because we've come to realize that as much as the inside of the cake might be delicious, people are also interested in what the outside of the cake looks like. So it's important to work with good colors that will pop, things that your client will be happy with.
Cakes can be decorated in different ways.
You're going around. You made up your mind what you want to do. So even as I'm talking, I'm still going around. It's like this. And you're picking it in like this.
While it could be buttercream icing.
So your focus should be on the icing going around the cake, not it being smooth. In the fridge, you can stay up to 5 days and it will be fresh. If it's outside the fridge, this is fresh fruit.
It could also be sugar craft.
This is the pure sugar. This is 100% sugar. There is nothing else there apart from sugar and water, basically. So we need stuff like this to make the frame. The frame is this part of the shoe, this part. So what we do sometimes is either I could get like a female to drop a leg, I trace it out of paper to make the form, and then I cut it here in fondant. So we'll place that one here, then we'll use this for the ear. Yeah, so we'll cut this out, let it dry in the heat room, place it somewhere here, and then we'll put this one on top of it. Once it's dry, sometimes it takes days to dry up. Once it's dry, then we can now start using hands to do these designs and do these designs and do these designs and do every other thing we want to do. But most of these crafts, they have these molds that make it easier for you to make them. So once you cut those parts together, you join them, you can now design.
The type of cake determines the type of temperature that goes with the cake. For some cakes, like buttercream icing, the fridge is not far away. Cakes are beautiful to look at, but the work that goes into its production can be quite tasking and time-consuming.
First thing I think you should consider is passion. Baking looks very attractive outside, but it's actually a lot of hard work, and you do most of it on your feet. Most times you're standing to work, so you have to ask yourself if you have the passion. Don't really go into things because of the money. Say, there's money in cake, let me go and start doing this, because you will get stuck. So once you have the passion for it, go to a proper training school and then learn the basics, and then you can kick up from there. Your creativity too will come to play.
Daily new trends keep evolving in the cake industry. Constant development and training is necessary.
We learn every day. I go for trainings every now and then. As I'm training people, I'm also being trained. Like I have some trainings I have to travel for now. I've already booked them. So we keep learning every day. When it comes to baking, it's a continuous process. I think it's like fashion. You don't get to the point where you say you've known it all. No, no, no. You just have to move with the trend. And you know, your clients are also viewing the trends. So they see those trends and they come and meet you. So what I actually do is, when a trend is coming up, I'm already seeing it. So I'm already equipping myself even before the client comes to say, I want this type of cake.
Starting a business can really be challenging. Dakwa shares his experience.
Very difficult. Starting a business in Nigeria, not even Lagos, is extremely difficult, especially when you don't have like the capital push for you to start. Everything was difficult. I remember when I started here, that was when dollar was about 500 and something to a naira. So after I paid my rent for this place, I didn't come close to this place for 6 months because there was no money. The few people I wanted to invest wanted 50% equity for 5 million. That would probably not even buy more than 1 or 2 machines here. So it was very difficult getting funds. And back then the banks were extremely stiff. They only gave money to people that are popular in town. So it was difficult for startups. Yeah, dollar was high, everything was expensive. But at the end of the day, I started small. I saw that I probably do not need to start with cake making immediately. I started with trainings. So I used the funds I gathered from trainings to set up the space, buy things, and then kickstart it. But it was not an easy journey. I am sure I wasted my first 1 year trying to get funds to start up this place.
One pitfall he says he fell into was working without a plan.
I actually did not have any plan, so to speak. I just knew I wanted to have a business, a structured business. But I had no plan for my structure. I had no written document. I had nothing. I just knew I wanted to have a cake store, and I know inside my head how I want my cake store to be. But I wasn't thinking about the fact that I needed capital. I wasn't thinking about the fact that I needed manpower. I needed to get good people to work with me so I can be able to not use all my time making cakes, so I can think about the structure of the business and how to even get customers, because customers is key, like they say. So to start up, I think everybody, so you need to have like this plan of how your business will work, how you intend to start, how you intend to push it to the level you want it to be. And it is extremely important to have a mentor. That I didn't have.
Becoming a cake baker cannot be achieved without basic training and practice.
So they just need to get the drive to keep learning. It's not easy when you go do trainings. I've gone somewhere else to learn something in particular before. And since when I got back, it's been extremely difficult to practice the exact thing. So if I was a startup now, I know that will probably be a challenge to me. I think that's one of the issues that most of them have, the drive. Most of them, when they encounter some certain issues in the business, they tend to just move on to something else.
According to Dakwa, startups need to push themselves more.
I believe they need to push themselves more than usual. They need that drive, because outside going to pay people for trainings to learn, YouTube has made it easy for you to learn so many things. Nigerians actually like to learn beside the trainer. They don't really know how to self-train. Most of the things I know, I learned myself. I probably learned from seeing someone do it, but majorly I watched a lot of videos too. Those videos were put there by people that want some other people, startups or young people, to self-train themselves and grow in business. But of course, you can't depend on only videos on YouTube or any other place. You need to know the basics from the YouTube. It's easier for you then to now go and pay someone to learn something in particular.
And Dakwa takes us through the process of how we mix a character cake.
We also make a lot. In fact, we make them so much that sometimes we've made one character like over 50 times. Wow. So once the customer mentions the name of the cartoon, we go on the internet, we print pictures of the cartoon out, and then we try and recreate in sugar form. This one has no mold whatsoever. So it's pure sugar too. So we take processes. So if we're going to make this, we start from the foot, make the foot to the tummy, attach the hands, attach the head, and do the details.
You have molds for all of this too?
No molds, your hands. These are the molds. So everything here is done with hands. There are things like this are the ones that are difficult. Yeah. You need to use molds for some of this.
roll and roll and roll.
Yeah. We roll,
Okay.
drag the legs out, drag the belly out, attach the hands, attach the head.
This is slightly easier.
Easier. Characters are actually easier. Though some of them are actually very technical, but some of these characters like this are actually easy to make. It's just sugar, glucose, and gelatin, and we're good. And sometimes egg white, depending on the weather. Yeah. Yeah, that's icing sugar. So, after this, we cover the board that the cake is going to be sitting on. Give me royal icing. Another carrot here. This space is usually for the names, yeah, just the names. I put the age of the celebrants here somewhere here. Give me my stars.
Some challenges bakers face range from getting good ingredients to meeting customers' expectations.
Sometimes your ingredients can affect you. There was a time I had a problem with my flour, which was making my cakes very hard, and I kept getting so many complaints, oh, the cake is hard, the cake is hard. So I had to try an imported brand, and the Nigerian brand I was using, and I realized that it was the flour giving me issues, so I had to change that. So ingredients is one of the things. Not meeting the customer's expectation. Sometimes the customer wants something, you might think, okay, this is my interpretation of the thing, but it's not what the customer wants. So meeting the customer's expectations, you know, deliveries, you can never ever predict Nigerian traffic. So your cakes might get out late, the customer is upset. I still had an issue about last week or 2 weeks ago, and I had to just find a way to compensate the customer. And I mean, it ended up turning out well.
And this is where the government needs to come in.
Imagine if we had the Nigerian brand of butter, which was cheaper, a lot of things would be easier for us. The taxes are ridiculous in the cake business also. I mean, the taxes are very, very high for us. And you just think, how are you going to, this small startup, we're a small business, you know, some of us are actually small businesses, and you have to pay this amount of taxes, and you're trying to figure out, okay, where's the profit, where's the tax, you know? If concessions can be made for us, I think that would also be great.
And at the end of the day, the taste of the cake is what counts.
For you to even stand out as a cake company that majors in fondant, there has to be something specific that you're doing very well for you to even be noticed in the industry. So modeling is part of it. The act of trying to make objects, people, items, maybe fruits, food, in sugar form. Yeah. And that's it. Please, can I get a plate? Bringing light since last week Thursday. Yeah.
Very nice. Every business has its leading stage, so constant learning on the job allows for consistent growth. Despite the challenges that comes along the way, consistency is key for progress to occur. Thank you so much for watching Community Reports on Channels Television this week. If you miss any parts of the show, you can check it on our YouTube channel. You can also send your comments to the social media handles showing on your screen. Until I see you next week, stay blessed.